Hey, it's Greg Schweitzer, the founder and chief catalyst at Catalyst Transformation Institute. And I'm wondering if you ever feel like you need more to get through. Do you ever have those times when you feel like your tank is empty, like you're constantly pushing, but it just doesn't seem to be enough, right? There's always something coming at you, something trying to get in the way, right? Even the simple things seem heavier than they should be. You ever have those days? I know I do, and honestly, even recently, I've had over the last couple of weeks just a lot of things coming at me, and I was wondering, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to get through? And then I remembered some really important things, and I gave it a shot. All right, I gave it a shot, and I want to share with you what came out of that. Really, ultimately, what I'm talking about right now is called resilience, right? And yes, I'm outside. It's beautiful, so you can hear cars driving by, and I don't care because it's gorgeous out here, but I'm sure you can still hear me fine. Now, we're talking about resilience, okay? Resilience is, it's so incredibly important. It's so foundational to just living well and doing well and working well. And so let's talk about what this looks like. I mean, what the heck is resilience anyway? Why do we feel like there's just constantly a pressure coming at us when we're trying to walk in the opposite direction? And actually, you know what's funny is I looked up the definition of resilience because I had my idea of what it was like, and I was pretty close, but I got a kick out of the dictionary definition of resilience. And one of the things that it says, there's actually two things it says I want to share with you. One of the things it says is that, let me tell you my definition. My definition was your ability to withstand what is coming at you. That's my definition of resilience. Your ability to withstand that which is coming at you. Now, when you look at the dictionary version of this, one of the things they referred to was recovery time. Their definition included how quickly you can get back to some sort of normalcy, right? Some sort of normal state, if you will, when things are coming at you, or when you feel like you've been taken out, or when the pressure's on. Okay. So that was one interesting piece. And I actually had a coach in my life at one point in time tell me, Greg, your recovery time stinks. Like when something comes at you and it hits you, it takes you a longer time to recover from that than it necessarily needs to. And I learned a lot from that. And hopefully you can too. So, with what your recovery time is like. Here's an interesting thing too with recovery time and with resilience is that we need to have resilience not only for the negative things that are coming at us and trying to take us out and trying to push us down, but we need to have resilience around the positive things too. I know that seems kind of weird, but you ever heard of that phrase that says you can have too much of a good thing, right? Sometimes there's a lot of energy and things involved in the positivity. You ever have those times where it's like, hey, the friends have called, or it's time we're gonna go, we're invited to go have dinner at the neighbors or something like that, and you just, you know what? I don't have it in me. I just don't have it in me to be social or to do this. It's great. It's cool. It's positive. Everybody loves great relationships. It's nice to be wanted. It's nice to be invited, but not tonight, right? And so I want you to know that that there's a positive and a negative side to this whole recovery time resilience thing. Okay, so recovery time was one thing that came up in the definition. The other one was it actually said this was the ability to spring back into shape. And I got thinking about this. I was like, spring back into shape. That's a really good way to look at it, because sometimes the things that are coming at us, and we're all after really good things, right? And we're wanting to have a good life, and we're wanting to do great work, and we're wanting to run our businesses and our careers and our families and the whole things. We're going after it, right? But if you have those things that just bend you out of shape, you just get bent out of shape about stuff. It's like, I am tired of pushing up against this, or, oh, it's just about there, and then something else showed up, right? And you may still get there from time to time, but just sometimes it just feels like there's enough interference showing up, right? So what I want you to understand is that resilience itself is actually an act of the will. It means you got to try. It means you got to put some effort into it. It means you have to decide that you're going to stand against the wind, right? When the wind is blowing in your face, you got to stand against it, at least for a time. Any good thing, any great thing that has ever come to a person or to a community or to a nation, or even if you look at some of the world's greatest inventions, it was because somebody had to stand against the wind or stand against the current, if you will, of something coming at them, but only for a time. Now, how do we do this, right? How do we become more resilient? And I know there's a lot of talk, it seems like these days, around resiliency, but you know what? I'm a big fan of keeping things simple. You and I have enough things going on in our life that we just don't need to have more complication. We don't need to have more things that we have to give ourselves to. And so let's make it simple. Let's make resilience simple. And honestly, let's make it fun. I mean, why does everything have to be such a drudgery and have to be so challenging and have to push myself so hard? We can make this fun and interesting, right? So let's take a look at this. How do we grow resilience? And the reality is, it may come from a really uncommon, really unlikely place. The best way to get stronger in resilience is from your past problems. This is why I titled this video, Remember Your Chains. I want you to think about this. I want you to think about some past instances where you really had to fight for something, where you really had stuff coming at you, had a problem, a challenge, an issue, whatever you want to call it, okay? Think about those things. And then think about that into relation to where you are now. This is going to be very, very powerful, okay? I want to introduce you to the idea of doing a resilience inventory, okay? A resilience inventory. And yes, I just made this up, but it's the coolest thing ever. I did this for myself these last couple of weeks when I was dealing with my stuff, right? And I said, hey, you know what? I know a little bit about this stuff. I want to try this out. And so I did what I call a resilience inventory. Now, I want you to know that there are 6 key areas to the human person that you want to know about so that you can do your resilience inventory, okay? The 6 key areas are identity, okay? Our own personal identity, our values, our beliefs, our behaviors, and our environment. I'll say that again. Our identity, values, beliefs, capabilities, behaviors, environment. Okay? Now, what's interesting about this is that each level of these things, and I did make them in order, have each layer higher, identity, higher than values, which is higher than capabilities, has a more profound effect over the trajectory of our life and the trajectory of our ability to be resilient. Here's how you do your inventory. I want you to sit down and remember a specific time when you struggled, when things were hard and challenging. You needed to dig in and to have some resiliency. Okay? I want you to remember what that was like. Then I want you to come back to now, and I want you to think about your identity. And I want you to ask yourself the question, how are you different now? Who do you know yourself to be now that you weren't before? What did you gain from that experience that makes you stronger and more courageous and more adept and more able now than beforehand, when you didn't know how to handle that, when you were facing it for the first time? Okay? This is how we do an inventory. Then you take a look at your values, right? You look at your values and you look for resiliency. You go back to more of your past experiences. And by the way, you can do this with multiple experiences in your memories, right? In your past history, where things were really hard, where you were pushed up against the wall and you're like, I don't know if I can handle this stuff, right? Look at your values and ask yourself, what's important to you now more than it was before? What do you value now that you didn't value before because you had to go through that? Values are very, very critical to the human person. And if we have anything that asks us or requires us to live outside of our values, it becomes a real problem in life. And so what are your values like now? Now, the third layer is we call capabilities. This is actually about your potential. That's what capabilities are about. And so when you go back and you look at some of these same circumstances where you were required to stand against the current, right? What do you believe now? Okay? What are you capable of doing? What can you make happen now, your capabilities, that you couldn't before? What do you know how to do now that you didn't before? We do this with kids all the time, right? They're faced against something they've never done before. I've never climbed a ladder before, Dad. Will you hold the ladder? Right? Or will you carry me up? Or some version of that. Or I don't want to do it. And yet, son, yes, you're going to do it. Daughter, yes, you're going to do it. And you make them do it. But once they've done it the one time, or maybe twice, now they're like, oh, I climb ladders. That's what I do. Okay? So what have you gained in terms of capabilities, right? That you can do something that you weren't able to do before. All right, so we've covered identity, we've covered values, we've covered capabilities. What about beliefs? What do you believe about how the world works that you didn't believe before you had to experience and stand against the wind? What do you believe about yourself? What do you believe about people and the world? And what do you believe about what's possible? I can't tell you how critical it is for you to grow in a belief of possibility. Many people get stuck because they believe or they stop believing that things are possible anymore. So when you came out on the other side, and even if it didn't look like you wanted it to look like when you came out on the other side, what do you know now, right? What do you know now that's different? What do you believe now that's different? All right, behaviors. What are you doing now that you never did before? What are you capable of doing that you never did before, and are you doing it? And then lastly, your environment. What does the whole of your life look like? Where you live, who you hang out with, what you do for work, where you go, what your home and your car looks like. How is that different from the past times where you were required to be resilient? Listen, I want to wrap this up and I want to tell you something. You are much more capable. You're much more resilient. You're much more courageous and strong than you are giving yourself credit for. And for you to take some time and go back into your past and remind yourself of when you stood up against that which was coming at you, when you stood up against the opposition and you really held out for yourself, regardless of what came, my friend, the victory is not in the outcome. The victory is in the choosing to stand against for a time as you need to, and then you turn that new skill over into habit. The victory is in the choosing to stand against, and that's what resilience is all about. It's an act of the will until you turn it over to habit. But the bottom line is that you have gone through and you have come through tough things before. You are resilient. You just got to believe it, you got to remember it, and you got to use it. You see, greatness becomes you when you do this inspiration or this resilience inventory. Because when you look at the resilience that you've had in the past, it's inspiring. You're like, yeah, I did do that. And you can use that to move forward for whatever is next for you. Listen, you know I love you. Be great. It's what you're made for.